Takes a lot to make a stew, doesn't it?
See it rolling.
Happy? Perfect. Are you ready?
I'll get ready.
So, the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was playing career, and not many people will know this, is I think you played junior football until you were 23, but most people would have thought that maybe their career, it wasn't happening, like they weren't going further. Did you think that? Did you feel that it was over for you?
Yeah, I did. I had a lot of setbacks before I even made it into the game. You know, I had 6 good years at Lanark. Really enjoyed it, probably set me up for the rest of my career. The hustle and bustle of junior football with ex-senior players kicking you up and down the pitch. But I had a desire, you know, and I always believed that one day I would make it to being a professional football player. And that never left me. And I think having that mindset eventually got me where I wanted to get to. And I'll always be thankful to Lanark United because they gave me that opportunity to get into the professional game. And then obviously Clyde FC was my first professional club, and I'll always be grateful to them as well because they gave me that opportunity to live the dream.
What was that jump like when you get to Clyde? Did you notice it? Because junior football, it's a rough game, but it must have felt like a kind of different world to be. Were you full-time by then?
I was, and like you said, for the first 6 months it was hard to get used to. Obviously fitness levels, the standard, and going from junior football to basically one league off the Premier League was a massive jump. And yeah, it did take me a little while, and I always had doubts that can I make it, even though I was there now. But again, the hard work away from Clyde, at my own self, doing extras, eventually got there. And also the players, you know, the players were brilliant. We had a young group, Joe Miller and Graham Roberts took me in, and the two of them were brilliant, and we had a really good group. And I loved every minute of it. And it took me a little while to settle, but once I settled and got used to the full-time football, I thrived off of it.
No, one of the things you've mentioned in the past is when you were managing the Hamilton Accies on the 17s, is that you said you would have hated to have managed your younger self. What was it? Because you're not, the way you are now is completely different in the way you describe it from how you were as a footballer. Like, what were you like then?
I was probably just that much want to make it. I was so angry within. I was a moaner, so I was always moaning at players. But like you've just said in your question, I think as you get older, you start to develop, you start to relax a little bit, you take in a lot more information. I think I was just so engrossed in wanting to make it as a footballer. I was, like I say, driven, always on people. And like I say, when I look back, I wish I could have changed. But I think it would have been very difficult to, if I was a manager, manage myself, I think it would have been difficult back then in the first 6-7 months at Clyde.
But it makes like such a big difference because you have all that pressure comes off you when you're actually in the professional game. But you start to enjoy your football then? Once you're not in the door because you always have to keep working, but does something change in you?
I think when I got the opportunity to go to Clyde, I didn't want to lose it. So I was always demanding, I was always on people. I didn't want to go back to being a part-time football player, working 12-hour shifts. I wanted to get better. But when the penny eventually dropped for me, I think it was when I started coaching. I got a better understanding of the game. I understand what I wanted from my managers or what they were looking from me, and also for the players. I understood what they were looking from me. And I'll always say that, I even say that now to my players, go and start your coaching badges early. Don't wait until your career's over, because you'll become a better player, you'll understand the game better doing your badges. And like I say, that for me was imperative, and I think it made me a better player as well.
Well, because it makes you like essentially an extra coach on the pitch, the more you know. But I want to talk about maybe the highlight, and you can tell me if it's not, is scoring the winning goal against Celtic. Does anything top that in your playing career? To knock them out of the cup?
I think for a lot of reasons it was probably one of the top highlights. That season with Morton we were really poor. We were struggling at the bottom end of the table. and we went to Celtic Park with the basically just turn up and we'll be knocked out. But for whatever reason, we galvanised ourselves that night, and that's what it takes. You know, I've been there many times against the Old Firm, Celtic and Rangers, and you really need us to be on a good day and them to be on a bad day, and I think that's the case that night. You know, Celtic had all the superstars out: Van Dijk's, Guidetti, Chris Cummins, Scott Brown's, them all playing. And like I said, I think we've done enough to win the game, but don't get me wrong, we're under a lot of pressure.
Can you tell me what it's like to be in a changing room after a victory like that?
It's pandemonium.
Really?
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like I say, you can never get those moments back in football. The adrenaline, the buzz of winning. But again, from the magnitude of the game, beating a Celtic or a Rangers or anybody in the Premier League when you're a smaller club, it's amazing. And as a player, that's what you want to be. You know, I wish, looking back, I could maybe have done 10% more. Because, like I said, it'd have been amazing to go and play at one of these football clubs. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed my career. But when I look back, I think at times I felt comfortable because, like I said, I had a good career at Hamilton. I was there for 9 years. And like I say, I always look back, not with regret, but could I maybe have done 10% more to maybe get recognised and maybe sign for one of these bigger clubs and see what it was like to maybe go and win things. Be in cup finals, playing in Europe, playing for the national team. But like I say, that's now my job with my players, is to try and get them to realise that they've got huge potential to fill.
Well, so then, what would you say the biggest lessons that you picked up from your playing career that you were able to take into coaching as you started to make that journey?
Well, obviously now you've got a lot more resources. You've got a lot more at your doorstep. You know, GPS, video analysis. So there's a lot more to the game than when I was playing. So, like I say, the gym, you've got sports scientists, you've got everything. And all I ask is my players is just to go and utilise everything they can. Like I say, we don't train for a lot. You know, we train 2-3 hours a day. What would you rather be doing? Would you rather be maybe going into the gym for an extra hour or working a building site for 12 hours? I know what I'd rather be doing, so I try and instill that in my players to try and give more, maximise your career, give it everything. You can always go back and look yourself in the mirror and say, I've done everything I could. Unfortunately, I just never got the opportunity to go higher, or I never got picked up. And I always try and say, don't ever have regrets.
And you don't have regrets from that career, you don't think? Apart from, I mean, you mentioned the 10%, but you had a very good career, and you had some very special moments. And so you start coaching with the Ackies, and this is one of the things that I hadn't realised beforehand. You made Hamilton Ackies under 17s the best in Scotland, and you took them to the UEFA Youth League. That is an incredible achievement looking back. I mean, that's never going to happen again, almost certainly.
No, listen, like I can't take all the credit for that. You know, there was other staff members who were a part of our team, but it was amazing. You know, when I look back, it's another good memory I have. You know, to be in your first coaching job in youth football and get the club to European football against the first game was against Nordsjælland of Denmark. The second game was against Midtjylland, two massive clubs. The first game was against Basel. Whose youth academy spent £7 million that season against Hamilton Ackies, who, no disrespect, were probably spending £20,000. So it's massive in terms of the golf, and we put them out. But the whole season was unbelievable. You know, we went 24 games, 20 wins, 4 draws, didn't lose a game. It was unbelievable. But again, the group of players, a lot of them now still playing Championship football. Lewis Ferguson at Bologna. There's a lot of good kids who still, like I say, are playing the game at a good level now, that I'm proud of. But again, there's a lot of other people within that staff that done a good job as well. It just wasn't myself. You know, we had people out watching games, coming back with match reports, so that the next game we were going into, we were ready for them. But we're going watching games myself to look at the teams, look at players, how they set up, to try and give the younger kids an in, before the game even kicked off of how teams would set up, etc., and their strengths, their weaknesses, their star players that we could try and combat. And that's never left me. And I'm always thankful to Hamilton for giving me that opportunity to become a coach.
Are you still kind of giving the players that you see in the Championship a pat on the head? Like, is it funny to see them again now? Was it 8 years later?
It's good. It's nice to see them. Like I say, I had good memories. You know, I coached at Hamilton in the academy for 7 years. And to see these kids coming through and make a name for themselves in the game, you know, I was only a small part of that. But from my point of view, I have some great pride in that. You know, I've been part of their journey, and it's good to see them making a way. A lot of these kids are still young, they've still got an opportunity to go higher. And like I say, now that's my job, is to try and develop and bring kids through to try and give them a pathway in the game.
And so after that, you'd mentioned in the past that you'd not been interested in coaching. You didn't see yourself as a manager. But how did you kind of end up bridging that gap? You end up working for David Martindale. Yeah,
if we go back to that moment, you know, I just came into Hamilton in 2015. I just left Morton. And it never struck me to be a coach. You know, I was too engrossed in my own game. I just wanted to play football. I wasn't interested in everything else. And then one day I was just asked the question, would you like to come in and take a session tonight? And I was like, I can't really be bad, I just want to go home and sleep. And then I thought about it, and I said, right, okay, I'll come in and see how it goes. And from there I got the bug.
Really? What does it feel like? What's that bug that you're talking about?
I think it's hard to explain. You know, when you're a professional footballer, you get this burning desire to just play. It's like an adrenaline. And I think it's the exact same in coaching. I think to be a manager or a coach at any level, you need to have a bug. You have to have a desire. You can't. It's not just something you can switch on and off. Sorry, like a light switch. You have to have the desire to want to do it because it's tough. It's like I say, it's up and downs. You have good days, you have bad days. So I think you have to have the drive to be that person because there's a lot of dark days. You're on your own. You know, you're the guy at the top. There's no other person to support you. You have to be that leader. You're the figure that everyone looks to for guidance and advice. So, but yeah, going back to that day, I just knew straight away this is the next step for me. And then from there, I wanted to go on a journey of doing my badges. You know, I went through them all. I'm nearly at the end of my pro licence, which has been a great 2 years learning as well. So, yeah, I'm very thankful for the opportunity that Hamilton gave me to start my coaching journey as well.
Okay, David Martindale, what was it like to learn from him? What can you tell me about him as a person? Because I'm sure he has very good things to say about you.
Yeah, as a person, he's unbelievable. That's one thing that I learned from him was his man management, his people skills, everything that Davey does. And even up to now, you know, we've still got a great relationship. We speak most days. He looks after his staff and his players, everything that he does. You know, he's a really astute coach, really top manager in my opinion, but no one sees the other side of Davey. You know, he does coach, he does the training sessions, and then straight away he's in and he's knocking walls down.
I've seen he does DIY. We did an interview with him, and he was like, I put that up, I put that up, I put that. This is why it's like he is incredible at that club.
Yeah, everything at Livingston's Davey. Yeah. You know, he's done everything, the gym, the food, the bus, the infrastructure is all down to Davey Martindale. And like I say, he's a top guy, he's a top manager. And just learning from him, you know, he brought me in to set up the academy for them. Now that's thriving. And also be part of the first team as a coach. And like I say, I really enjoyed my first 6 months. And like I say, I think if the Morton job never came up, I would probably still be there. Really? Because I really enjoyed it. You know, it was a great environment to be in. You know, he gave everybody everything. And don't get me wrong, he's a hard taskmaster. Yeah. Like I say, he's on everyone. But I think you need that. You need guidance. You need a vision. And he certainly gives his teams that.
Do you have a favourite memory from your time working with him? Like one that kind of sticks out?
To be honest, I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah.
There isn't one thing that comes back to me and go, oh, I really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the 6 months, you know, just working closely with him and Marv. the other staff, the players, and even now there's still players there that were there when I was there, and we've got great relationship. You know, we go back there, or they come to Caplo, and it's great. It's just cuddles and smiles, and like I said, there's no bad feelings.
Not even when he pinched Robbie Muirhead.
Nah, listen,
That's just part of the game.
that's just part of the game. You know, Davey recognised that Robbie would be an asset for him. Like I was disappointed to lose Robbie, of course I was, because Robbie was a massive player for me. In the 3 years that I worked with Robbie, he scored 35 plus goals for me, and that's a massive return, but it's also a massive loss. And like I say, I was really disappointed I lost Robbie, but you can see this season again, he's kicked on again, and like I say, that will be down to Davy Martindale.
But that also says a lot about your ability to develop players that maybe beforehand weren't getting much attention. And we'll come on to this, but Morton becomes like a platform for players to express themselves, and that takes a lot of work to do. But before that, the offer itself, how does that come out? You've got the link with the club, but surely that might have been a shock for you.
Yeah, well, obviously when don't ever want to see anybody lose their job. When Gus McPherson got relieved of his duties, you know, I had in the back of my head, like, when is the right time to become your own man? And listen, I didn't think for 1 minute I would get the job offer. I was more interested in having interviews and speaking to boards and getting that side of my development better, being in those environments where you're having to ask tough questions, you're putting yourself across, you're trying to sell yourself, you're trying to get jobs, and I thought it would be beneficial for me. So like I said, I applied, spoke to Davy gave me his blessing, did try and talk me out of it right enough because he wanted to keep me. Went through the process, had 2 interviews, and then got the call to say, listen, we want to offer you the job. And like I says, I was over the moon because I felt the time was right. I was ready for the challenge. And everyone asked me why Morton, because they were relegated basically. You know, there were 13 points I think after 18 games. They were detached by 5 or 6 points. I think Dunfermline were the closest team. But I knew I could do it. I wanted to prove to people that I could go in there and change them and get them safe, and I done that. But again, I also had the good staff round about me. Andy Millen has been a massive part of my development as well. You know, he's been through the mill. He's 30 years experience in the game, and having that beside me, you know, I went there myself. I just wanted to go and get a job. I didn't think about who's going to come for me, who's my number 2, what staff do I want. I wanted to go in. I wanted to work with who was there, and I wanted to prove to people that I could do the job. And I think in the last 3.5 years, I think I've done a no bad job, but again, that's for other people to answer those questions.
Well, you've got more Manager of the Month awards than I've had at Hot Dinners this year, I think. So I think you've done okay. But the club itself is fascinating, and I think everyone in Scotland has a soft spot for Greenock Morton because of the ground, but also the fans. They always stick by the club. There's just something about it, the way it's set up. But how good was it for you? They weren't doing well, obviously, but what was the club like for you in that time? How were they supporting?
Yeah, it was first and foremost, I was delighted to be given the job because they took a gamble. You know, a young manager, never had any experience of taking a first team, had just done youth coaching, had 6 months experience as a first team coach. So again, I've got a lot of gratitude towards Greenock Morton for giving me that opportunity. You know, it could have been easy for them to go with the usual merry-go-round, the same names, but they went a different direction. They gave a young coach the opportunity to come and express himself, which I was very grateful of, because there is young top coaches out there. They just need a chance, and it'd be good to see some more be given that opportunity. But yeah, they gave me the platform to come in and take them forward. You know, they did take a chance. Let's not be kidding with anyone on. But I must have done enough in an interview to be given that chance. But I always believed that in my own ability that I could get them out of the trouble they were in. And like I say, we managed to finish 7th that season. But the support's been great. You know, they're fan owned, so it's not like you're dealing with one person. You've got the club board, and then you've got a fan board. So at times it can be pretty hectic, really? Dealing with both, albeit I only really need to speak to one because the other board deal with the other board, and then they come together and then I deal with that side of things. But Yeah, it's been great. You know, it's been 3.5 years of ups and downs, but to finish fifth the last 2 seasons has been incredible. And again, that's down to the hard work of the staff and the club trying to find resources.
And yourself, obviously. What would you say is the ethos of Greenock Morton? Like the DNA that you've kind of put a twist on? Like if people were thinking of Greenock Morton, what would they be kind of watching?
Well, for me, we have to be proactive.
Yeah.
You know, we understand that we're not blessed with resources and a lot of cash. A lot of these teams in the Championship have got a lot better resources than me, sorry. So we have to be, or I certainly have to be more proactive and ahead of the game. Because I need to be making sure that I've always got my finger on the pulse of players that may be available. And I think over the years, you know, Liam Grimshaw, Robbie Crawford, George Oakley, Aaron Lyle, just to name a few that I've had to be, like I say, on the ball to even get the opportunity to bring them to Morton, because these are top players that could have went elsewhere. But my ethos is, come to me, I'll give you the platform and I'll hopefully get you to a better level. I might not be able to give you bucket loads of money, but I can certainly give you the platform to go and express yourself. And like I say, I think I've done a good job of that. You know, Jamie Brandon came in from Hearts, had just done his cruciate ligament. I gave him a platform for 6 months. Davey gives him a 3-year deal at Livingston in the Premier League, albeit they got relegated last season. Jack Hamilton, I could rhyme off a million players. But I think we're a good selling club because we can give players that environment to go and thrive and go and try and kick on, and it's up to them after that. You know, I can give them the platform, I can give them the resources. It's up to the individual to go and kick on in his career.
Well, that's good, because I think a lot of players sometimes maybe they're not given that trust. Like maybe it's everything is done for them, but you're telling them, I'll give you everything you need, but from then it's up to you. And I think a lot of players seem to have responded to that. But the thing that I'm also interested in the time since you started up until now, noticed like tactically, your side are playing quite differently. And I think you've said that it's because you're in a way adapting to the players that you have. But are you not necessarily interested in playing differently? Is it also a bit of like chicken and egg? You maybe want to play a different style of football. Do you feel like you're kind of evolving as a manager? Yeah,
I think so. Obviously, when I first went in, I played a 3-5-2 because personnel could only allow me to play that way. But also I had to make sure I was winning games to survive. We managed to do that. I had to play that formation that 6 months I was in. Then my first full season, I played the way that I like the game to be played, a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3. I either play me 2 6s, 1 10 or 1 6, 2 8s. It's just variables. And we had a great season. You know, we finished in 57 points, missed out in the playoffs by goal difference. And then I built a team to play to our strengths. Yeah. And I think people don't see that. You know, we had strength at the top end of the pitch, so why would you not play to your strengths? I'm talking about George Oakley, Robbie Muirhead, Robbie Crawford, Jai Katongos, players that wanted the ball in behind. So we went more direct and played in the opposition's half because we could do that. And then we had good players round about that to pick up the pieces, get the ball wide, get the balls in the box. Then my second season, it was kind of similar, but we tried to play a little bit more. And again, went on that amazing 16-17 game unbeaten run, beat Motherwell, but unfortunately lost out to Hearts in the Scottish Cup in the quarter-finals. Narrowly missed out in playoffs again, lost the spine of our team with 6-7 games to go. That allowed Airdrie to leapfrog us into fourth. We finished fifth again, and then this season I've went a totally different dimension. You know, we're trying to now play through the lines, play out for the back, a totally different way of playing. But I think it shows that as a staff and a manager and as players, we're adaptable. We can play anyway. We've got players this season that we can, if we want, we can go back to front. And I've got players that we can play. So I think in football, you have to be adaptable. You have to be able to play to the challenge that's put in front of you.
But it does show you're versatile. But like, so who are the teams that, for example, that are on TV at the moment that you would kind of like to play like? Are there any teams that are impressing you at the moment?
Yeah, I think You look at Liverpool,
Yeah.
they're amazing. Man City have kind of come off the boil a little bit, but that can happen. Brighton play great football. Everybody wants to play great football. Everybody would love to play attacking, passing game. But unfortunately, you may not have the personnel to do that, so you have to adapt to what wins football games. And I think a lot of people forget the game is about winning. You have to win, it doesn't matter what way you win. Everybody talks about possession. You can have 90% of the ball and lose 1-0. No one's caring about how much possession you had. You have to win games. And like I say, I think people get dismissed of that. If I don't win games of football, I don't have a job. And that's the same in every manager's remit. You have to win. So as a manager, we would all love, like I say, to play like a Liverpool, have players like Salah, De Bruyne, Haaland.
Maybe one day.
But yeah, that's the dream. But unfortunately, you have to find a formula to make sure you're winning, to keep yourself in a job, and then hopefully you get an opportunity to move on.
Well, so I wanted to ask, hypothetically, if God forbid someone gave me a team to manage in the Championship, and I called you for advice, what would you tell me? That's my first job. What about kind of doing well in this league? What have you learned in the time?
One, I would say be yourself.
Yeah. Can people smell that, like inauthentic? Have you had that in your experience? Someone that was maybe playing it up a bit, you can tell immediately.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, without naming names, like an example of that happening?
I think in football you have to be honest.
Right.
Because I think in football there's that many people within the game that if you want to lie, you'll get found out.
Right.
And I would say that to anybody. Maybe that's my biggest issue. I'm too honest. Players aren't daft. They can smell a rat a mile away. If you're being dishonest or you're lying, players aren't daft. And I think that's one thing I've learned. And like you say, your question, yeah, I had it a couple of times in my career. So like I say, I've had a lot of good managers, I've had a lot of bad managers. But you'll probably hear every manager or any person you speak to say you always try and take the best thing from everyone. And I've tried to do that. I've tried to take everything from everyone and try and mould it into how I want to be, but do it myself, my way. I think as a person, you just want honesty. The player might not like it, but I think honest, and I think you get the best out of your players. And I think that if I'm being honest, I think that's why my teams have done so well.
Really?
Because we're not blessed with big squads. You know, every year I have to rebuild. So straight away I have to get the best out of them. I have to galvanise them. And I think sometimes that's difficult. You know, I think I learned that working under Davie, because obviously it was my first kind of job in first team football. In that season, Davie had to rebuild a squad of, I think, 17 players. And it took us till about October, start November before we started to click. And I found that at Morton this season, that I had to bring in another 15, 16 players, and it took us a wee while to get gelling. You know, we kind of started the season not too bad, then we fell away, and then we went on that, again, 11, 12 game unbeaten run. And obviously, with the finances at Morton, it's difficult for us, because it's certainly difficult for myself, because every year I'm firefighting, I have to rebuild. I'm bringing in a brand new squad nearly every season, so it's difficult, but it's something that I thrive off of, building groups, building players, building teams, and taking them forward. And that's one of the challenges I would say I have in my job at the moment, is trying to keep motivated, having to rebuild every year. I'm losing my best players, and it's trying to keep level-headed and not get frustrated and blindsided by doing that. And I think I've handled it really well each year.
But that's such a difficult part of the game, is having to start from scratch essentially every year. But we talked about it or mentioned it earlier, and that's the pro license course. I saw a few photos of yourself and some other people. Can you tell me about that? Because that's essentially all the best minds in coaching coming together and just sharing ideas. Can you tell me about that? What that experience was like for you?
Yeah, it's been amazing. Obviously the course started 2 years ago, We're just coming to the end of that in June, so that'll be our 2-year block finished. But yeah, like you said, the people that we've met, you know, Ange Postecoglou, David Moyes, Rafa Benitez, Lloyd Cortez, the insight of these people who've worked at the top, the very top, is invaluable for any young coach. And like I said, we just were in Geneva 2 weeks ago for 4 days. It was unbelievable. And again, I've picked things that Rafa Benitez spoke about. Now,
What did he tell you?
it was just about things that I've dealt with at Morton, that he's dealt with at wherever he's been, Newcastle, Real Madrid, Liverpool. And I'll give you a story. He was talking about the Champions League final against AC Milan. He was talking about the first half, so it's 1-0. And he's writing down in his wee notepad. Then it goes 2-0. And he's had to change his half-time team talk. So then it goes 3-0. And he's thinking, right, okay. So anyway, he's took his time. So he's in the dressing room and he's like, I can't remember the player, but he's right, you're coming off. So he's in the shower, and then the physio or the sports scientist came in and went, Gaffer, he'll need to come off. So he had to go back into the shower and say, you'll need to get your gear back on, you need to go back on.
To be able to come
Because it wasn't somebody else who'd get injured and he hadn't known, and he was taking this player off because he thought he was playing badly. So he's like, he says, and then we just got together. He says the next goal's really important, and then the rest is history. You know, they go and get it back to free each and winning penalties. But he did say about the penalty shout, he says the first 1 or 2 penalty takers will always score because they're the best. He says we always knew our goalkeeper, I think it was Dukek, would save one of them. He says once we got it back to free each, we knew we'd win. But again, just picking his brain, you know, I had a private chat with him for 5 minutes, just asking him stuff that he spoke about. And he says it doesn't matter what level you're at, these things happen, it's just at a bigger scale. So it was better for me, it was great for me to hear it from a guy that's basically done everything, that he still has issues similar to what I have, but at massive clubs.
But that's the point. They'll have had those issues throughout their career in the same way you'll have these things creep up and you'll tell people one day how to deal with them. But so kind of going into the future then, what were you hoping to get from that course, and what are you hoping it brings for the future of your career?
Well, obviously the course is prestige.
Yeah.
You know, it's the most prestigious coaching qualification you can have, but the course also allows you to be a manager in Europe. It allows you to manage in UEFA competition. So again, I've done it for that reason, because I want to get to the very top. Yeah. Like I say, I'm very early in my managerial career. I have ambition to manage it, like I say, is at the very top. Whether I'll get there's for other people to determine. I can only keep, like I say, plying my trade, winning games of football, and then hopefully you get an opportunity. But like I say, at the moment I'm really enjoying my time at Morton. I'm very grateful for being given the opportunity to manage them, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it.
I'm going to press you a little bit, but if another club were to come in, be it Europe or the Premiership, is that an offer that you would consider? And even are Great Morton happy for you to have those conversations? Do they understand the way the kind of game works?
Yeah, listen, I think that's a natural progression. If a team from the SPL or a team from Europe came in, then it would be a conversation that I would probably like to have. Again, I think Morton would be disappointed if I left. But again, it's like everything in life, people move on. And there will be a time comes where I'll move on, whether that's because unfortunately the results haven't been good enough, or the results have been good enough that someone else comes in and says, we would like you to be our manager. So, like I said, I can only, like I say, I always use the phrase, keep my 2 feet in the ground, keep working hard, keep battling through tough times, because we've certainly had tough times at Morton, but I think through my career I've been built on resilience, and I've dealt with those adversities very well and not let it affect my players. I think, to be fair, I think myself and Andy and the rest of the staff at Morton are very good in that capacity, that we don't allow negativity to go into the dressing room, we try and burden all that from, or I certainly try and burden that. And like I say, I've got a desire to go to the very top, and I give my all. I wear my heart on my sleeve as a manager, as I did as a player, because it's been instilled in me from a young age. So, like I say, that will never leave me, and I think it's a good trait to have.
I think so. That ability to kind of keep the negative stuff at bay, I wanted to know how you're able to do that off the pitch. I wanted to know what you're like away from football, because I don't think in the Championship people know enough about managers away from the kind of the Saturdays and the Sundays. But so what is it that you do away from football?
Well, up until my son was born, obviously he's my main reason for my ambition. You know, I want my son to have everything, so I'm driven to give him as much as I can. You know, but up until Jensen was born, then, like I say, to relax from football, I like to play golf.
Yeah.
I like the horses. You know, I like to go and watch, go to Hamilton. I used to go to Cheltenham, but it's very difficult to go to Cheltenham. It's an unbelievable occasion. You know, it's a great sporting occasion. And just spending time with my family and my missus. You know, we like to go away for spa days, etc., just to relax. I think, like I say, there's nothing better than sitting at the side of a swimming pool and listening to the water going down the drains. It's refreshing. It just sets you in a different place, and takes the pressure off of football. I think you need to do that, and I've learned to do that more since I became a manager. I would say the first 2 and a bit years at Morton, I dealt with it very well. Yeah. Nothing really fazed me. I think more so in the last year. I don't know if it's because I'm more into it now. I take defeats a little bit more harder. And I think I need to try and get away from that again, because it's not a great environment for anyone. But that's what football does to you. You know, you're engrossed in it. You don't want to lose. Like last night, for instance, you know, we're 2-0 down. You think, right, okay, we've lost 3 points. You then get back into the winning position, and everybody's great, everybody's jubilant. We think we're picking up a valuable 3 points, and then with the last kick of the ball, you lose a really poor goal, and you think you'd lost the game. And that's football. That's what it does to you. But like I say, I love every minute of my job, and like I say, the 90 minutes is what I thrive for. What's
the Imrie household like after a defeat? Do you keep to yourself? Do you lock yourself away, or are you able to switch off from that?
Nah, I can't switch off. Like I say, it's great to have the wee fella, because he just like brings a smile back to your face. He makes you forget about the game for a short spell. But like I say, after a game, I'm right back on the laptop. I maybe come away for 2 or 3 hours, but as soon as Jensen and Lauren go to bed or they're doing their own thing, I'm straight on the computer and I'm watching over the game. I'm going through stuff because I want to make us better. You know, I'm looking for what went wrong, where could we get better, where did it go wrong for us, and similar when we win. It's great winning, but you can always improve, and I'm always looking for things to improve us, and that's why I think we do so well, because we don't always look for the negative, we always look for the positive, and that's how it'll always be. If
Jensen said to you that he wanted to be a footballer, would you do your best to keep him away from it, or is that something?
Listen, people always ask for this, is Jensen interested in football? At the moment, no. And I wouldn't ever push him, because I think if you try and push them, they get resentment. So I would rather, if the wee fella wants one day says, Dad, I want to start playing football, then great, I'll be over the moon. But at this present moment, he's more interested in dinosaurs and poppy playtime and all this nonsense. So I just let him be.
That's a kind of great way for you to get away from football, is to just have something to do with the kind of family away from it. But so that kind of the difficulties of losing and things, How do you get over that? Do you have like a routine that you use the day after? Because you said you were in training today, which is not many people would do that. They usually take the day off, but you're in kind of anyway with the players.
Listen, I always ask Andy this, because you take it, if you're a coach or a player, you've always got someone you can ask, or someone will come and support you. I always ask myself, who supports me?
Yeah, that support structure. Yeah.
Who supports the manager? Because he's the focal point.
It's the-
Everybody looks at him, and like I say, I always, to be fair, I don't mention him enough. Like I say, Andy's top draw for me, because like I say, he's always there. If we lose, he's always there. He's always on the phone. He's always asking, "How are you? Everything okay? Don't worry about last night. We'll make it better. We'll get back on the bike." And just having that sounding board for me is imperative, because like I say, everything's great when you're winning. When you're going through hard times, adversity, you need someone there. And to be fair to, like I say, I'll go back into the pro licence. Rafa Benitez was excellent. He said, if you don't have support from above, you're done. And I think he was alluding to the fact that when things aren't going so well, as the chairman, as the board, as the CEO, as a sporting director, are they there for you? Talking about, I think, the manager. And he says, if you've got that support, then you'll be fine. But if you don't, then you're onto a loser straight away. So again, it was good to hear again from someone of that ilk, reiterating those things that sometimes I question.
But so you join into the sessions, but you get into the players as well. You don't kind of treat them as if you're the manager and you need them for the weekend. You proper you get into them.
Yeah, of course. I think it's important. We always try and like to train with an even number. So like I say, if there's 15, I'll join in to make it 16, etc, etc. So I just miss playing the game, so I don't want to give it up. So like I say, I'll join in most days if I need to. But there's no holding back. I train the way I played, so if there's a 50-50, then I'm winning
really?
it. Yeah, so they know. But listen, I want my players to do that on the pitch. So like I say, I played the game when you could do that. I know the game's evolving and VAR and can't tackle the way we used to tackle. But I still think you need that desire and commitment to not lose games. And I try and instill that in the players. And like I say, in our place, we don't want to lose training games. So the competitiveness is there every day.
They dish it right back towards you. Are they, or do they hold off? Do you think they hold off a little bit?
Some of them hold off, but if somebody catches me, I don't hold it against them. I say, that's what I want you to do on a Saturday. I just laugh. But 9 times out of 10, if someone smashes me, then you get a good reaction, because then it's, oh, you've just smashed the gaffer, blah blah blah. So no, listen, it's good. I like that side of the game. I loved that side of the game when I played, and I think it's a little bit lost now with the game changing. You know, I understand why, but I still think you need that edge to your game, and I try and still instill that in the players today.
Do you think there's anything else that maybe has changed in the domestic game that you would see come back?
That I would hope to see come back.
Yeah.
There are some things we've talked off air, maybe like some things that have changed that maybe would be good for the development of Scottish football. For example, there is something, and that's a lot of people have been talking about, and that's the expansion of the Scottish Premiership. And Dave Martindale's a big proponent of this, and he makes the point that it's not because that would see Livingston join. It's not about that. It's more about for the quality of the game itself. But is that something that you kind of support?
I would have to echo what Davey said. I've listened to his interviews a couple of times, what you're mentioning there. Like I think last season we played, I want to say Dunfermline. I think we played them 6 times in the one season. That was through, it was Rafe Rovers. It was through cup competitions. We got them in the SPFL Trust Trophy. We got them in another competition, and it becomes boring. Whereas if they expanded the leagues, now obviously the Premier League needs to be Rangers and Celtic, but surely they can come up with a platform that we can get those games in, plus have a split still that still makes the league exciting for everyone, and have more clubs, you know, even going into our division.
To help get Scottish players through, because it's not set up for them to do well. That's my opinion.
Yeah, I certainly think if the league was bigger, it may help to do that, because I think with only 10, 12 teams in the Premier League, obviously the money is paramount to these clubs to stay in the Premier League. Again, when you come down into Championship, that then gets smaller. So again, the development of younger players is maybe getting harping, because clubs want to stay in the Premier League, so they maybe don't want to maybe play as many younger kids in case they lose games, and then relegation maybe comes along. So again, that maybe be something that can maybe be spoke about to bridge the gap or try to develop kids, is make the leagues bigger, that then teams may be willing to give them an opportunity. But again, we spoke earlier off camera that you look at other nations, they're doing it and playing younger kids. You look at the kid the other day against Scotland, 17 years of age, unbelievable talent, playing for his national team. So again, I would no doubt that he'll be playing for whatever club he plays for every week. But certainly from my point of view, you know, you look at my squad this year, I brought in, like I say, a lot of 20, 22, 23-year-olds and gave them an opportunity to come and develop. So, like I say, I think for any young player, if they're good enough, they'll play. You know, I gave Cameron Key his debut last season, I gave him his league debut this year, and he's only 17 and he's already scored his first goal in competitive football. So, again, the platform's there for them, they just have to be good enough.
I want to ask that if you had the chance to take any player, doesn't matter how unrealistic, from the Scottish Premiership and have them play at Morton, who would you pick?
There is a few. I think the obvious one would be Lennon Miller. Albeit, and you probably won't like me saying this, I think the younger players in the Premier League get a lot more time, so I think the game in the Premier League suits Lennon. Like I say, he's an unbelievable talent. He's done magnificently well for himself, and by all rights, he's getting the plaudits that he deserves. The talk of him moving, which is great for him and his family. But again, when he came to Capello with Motherwell, he looked as if he hadn't played football before. Really? Because again, he never got the time and space that he gets playing for Motherwell against Premier League teams, because it's again, you have the ball, we'll have the ball. Whereas, and again, you look at the game on Saturday, the three kids from Celtic and Rangers playing at Capello, it was, like I say, a tough game for them. I think for these kids to develop and move on, I think it's important that they come and play for like a Morton or come out and play in the Championship more often, because, only my opinion, and this isn't a slant against anyone, I think they're protected at these bigger clubs, because when they maybe have to come in for a game, they're playing against teams that don't want to come out and express themselves against the Old Firm. So they look as if they are ready to come and play football. And then when they come to, no disrespect to a Morton or an Inverness or an Ayr United, it's totally different, because they're playing at a level where everybody's a much of a muchness. Whereas when they're playing for Rangers, Celtics, Aberdeens, Hibs, Hearts, you're playing with internationals round about. Your teams don't want to come out, because unfortunately better teams will cut you open. And I think the more younger players that can come out and come into the Championship, League One, I think it'll be better for them in the long run.
I mean, you laugh about it because it's so blown out of proportion, but it was the Scott Brown thing. Could you explain what happened to that? Because for people who don't know, this is completely different to what it would look like in the media, rather.
Well, I think for the media, they made it a mountain out of molehill, because obviously whoever took the picture had a great camera angle, which made the whole incident look worse than it was. But yeah, the moral of the story was, obviously there was a tackle happened, right in front of both dugouts. Like I says, 10 years ago it would have probably been a yellow card at most. But because the game's moved on, it was, like I say, it was a red card. It was a mid-time tackle, pretty high, going in at pace. In the modern day game, it's a straight red all day. And I think the reaction of the air bench made it look worse than it was as well. But, you know, myself and Scott are trying to calm things down. I'm a little bit aggrieved with one of Scott's players running from Siberia to get involved in a situation that had nothing to do with him. And like I say, there was no conversation between me and Scott at all. So again, there was nothing in it. It was just two managers trying to calm the situation down and we move on. But again, the story was made a million times worse than it actually was. There was nothing in it. And then, like I say, a few days later, we're both at the same game, sitting next to each other, talking about the game. So, yeah, like I say, I've got a very good relationship with Scott.
I've got one more question, and that is, if you could have played for any club in your career, which one would you have chosen? And any era in particular, like under any manager in particular?
As a player, or as a manager now, like I said, I like to have played under Pep Guardiola or Jurgen Klopp. I look at Diego Simone, and he, I think he has traits of me, although he's managing at the very top. Just with the way he is at the side of the pitch, he's passionate, he's driven, he's driving his players. But it would have been amazing as a player to play under, or just be under their leadership of how they see the game and how they set up their teams and what they want from you. But as a player, who would I have loved to have? Obviously I'm a Rangers fan. I'd have loved to have played for Rangers. And under a manager, Walter Smith.
Incredible.
Yeah, unbelievable.
Did you meet him?
I met him a couple of times, just at events, but not in person. And if you were to ask me in an era of playing for Rangers, would have been the era of Laudrup, Gascoigne, Alberts, Amorusos, Gattusos. Like, obviously, when I was a kid going to games, that was the two players, Gascoigne and Laudrup. Unbelievable.
That's a vintage.
What a player Paul Gascoigne was. I always remember a young kid sitting in the main stand right next to Rangers dugout, and he came off. I'm sure it was against Aberdeen. And again, 10, 11, 12 years of age, you're that wee guy wanting something, and he gave me shin guards. So, yeah, it was just an amazing experience.
Do you still have them?
I think I've still got them, but one of my biggest memories is my dad used to be a groundsman at Hampden Park in Glasgow, and I was privileged to hold the World Cup.
Did you?
So, yeah, that was probably one of my fondest memories of football as well. I've still got that picture, so yeah, that's a dream, and a distant dream of one day could I hold it for real at a competition. But yeah, to get my hands on that was a massive privilege as well.
Well, it's been a massive privilege to talk to yourself. Thank you very much.
No worries, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.